Okay, so this is week 4 of the Forest of Life Venus calendar. The Forest of Life moves through the 32 key parts of the TARO, also known as the Kabbalistic intelligences or paths of wisdom. And as it does so, each week we have a subject to discuss, to explore, to enter into some kind of energetic dialogue with. And so this week, the subject is the sphere of Chesed in the Kabbalistic tree of life. And as you should know, certainly if you're taking my course, the sphere of Chesed is the fourth sphere, and it is found on the right here on the pillar of mercy. So there's 3 pillars in the tree of life. There's the pillar of mercy, the pillar of severity, and in the center the pillar of mildness. And these represent essentially the 2 extremes of expansion and contraction, and then the equilibrium that comes with levels of consciousness. So in this order, known as the path of the lightning bolt, because it flashes, I'll show you this again, goes like this. It goes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It looks like a lightning bolt or a flaming sword. It's sometimes called that. It's the order that the Sephiroth, or spheres, are emanated. And these are basically like chakras or centers of energy. And it means literally numbers. Sephiroth is plural, and Sephira is singular. And what's interesting is there's 10 of them, and essentially there are 3 groups of 3 plus another one that summarizes the whole system. And the reason I say that is because these 3 triads are pretty important. If you can think of the number 3 to represent beginning, middle, and end, we can think about the supernal Sephiroth, numbers 1, 2, 3, as the beginning, middle, and end of the beginning. And then we can look at the numbers 4, 5, and 6, the second triad, as representing the beginning, middle, and end of the middle. And then finally, the third triad of 7, 8, and 9 is the beginning, middle, and end of the end. And then 10, in a way, is the encompassing whole that commensurates the entire system. Okay, all this is sort of fancy talk. So what are we talking about this week? Well, this week we're essentially at the beginning of a cycle again, because remember, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end, beginning, middle, end. So we're back at the principle of oneness, and yet this time we are below the abyss. And I keep bringing this diagram up, but it's pretty essential. The abyss is the zone between the top 3 and the bottom 7 Sephiroth. And you'll notice that you'd think there would be a sphere right here in the middle, but there isn't. Not in the Kircher tree. There is in other trees, but in the Kircher tree, which is the mainstream tree for Hermetic Kabbalistic work, also known as the descended tree, what's happened is a hole has formed, known as Dath. And Dath is basically the gap in our knowledge. Dath means knowledge. And it's the gap that we have to fill to recover the primordial tree, otherwise known as the Gra tree. And so most of the work we do in magic and in tarot involves using the descended tree, because the primordial tree, the heavenly tree, represents a state of achieved perfection. And we are not at this point assuming that that's the case with us. In a way, the Kircher tree is a bit like training wheels, and it has a greater leniency for energetic error, if you will. And we'll talk about that more in the weeks to come. But 4 is the first sphere that appears below the abyss. And if you think of what's happened, effectively, we're talking about increases of dimension. 1 is the pure dimensionless point that is an increase on dimension from out the open, lucent continuum, if you will. And then 2 is an increase of dimension, and that's the idea of involvement, of the Ouroboros, of the line. And then 3 is an increase of dimension which creates area, creates the triangle, creates form. And so 2, pure energy, 3, pure form, 1, pure consciousness, 0. There are words in some languages, such as Tao or God or En Sof or Sunyata, but no word, of course, can capture that which is fundamental. And yet, here we are, once we've hit 3 dimensions, understanding, there is a leap. And this is caused by adding a 4th dimension, if you will. And these are dimensions in the spatial sense. I probably confuse you here. But essentially a 4th point. And what does a 4th point do? A 4th point creates volume. And so I'm going to show you an altar now. This is a very Chesed-like scarf, so I decided to use it. So I built an altar. Now the thing about an altar is fundamentally based on a table. And tables are usually fourfold. There are sometimes, circular round tables, of course, and octagonal tables and triangular tables, but this is a square table. And on this square table, I have four tarot cards. We'll talk about that in a minute. I've got the 4 fours, because this is an altar to Chesed. I'm going to encourage you to make an altar this week, and on that altar, place things that remind you of the 4. So your cards, perhaps your book, your journal. I have a compass, which I'll show you in a moment, and a variety of things. The more you stack congruent forms onto your altar, the more it will act as an attractor or consolidator of your awareness. So we have come to Chesed, and I think that the kind of magic that I'd like to convey this week is altar magic. Altar magic is the setting up of a table with symbolic elements on it. And bearing in mind that the symbolic elements, these are all physical objects, pentacles, if you will, which carry with them their own mind, soul, and spirit. So each one of these objects, these runes, for example, has a body, a mind, a soul, and a spirit, depending on what level we're talking about. This is Tetragrammaton. This is the 4 elemental worlds, right? The body, the mind, the soul, and the spirit. So everything here essentially exists in 4 levels already. So by recognizing that, I have arranged the altar physically, but also mentally. I can understand it. I can look at it and read it. Spiritually, it creates a synergy, an imaginary space where I can start to combine ideas. And then finally, spiritually, it attracts that which it is set up to express. So with that in mind, there are no hard and fast rules, except put the cards, the 4s, on the table somehow. Incorporate them. And there's another figure I want to show you that's very important. There's a couple, actually. We've got a lot of interesting stuff for today. So I'm going to find a nice place to put this. This little stone is the 25th rune in my rune kit. I decided to throw the runes around because there's really 24 runes. This isn't connected to TARO so much. but of course I'm a syncretizer, so I do bring the systems together. But runes often have a 25th rune that come with them. That's a modern innovation, a blank rune. But I put that in the center, and I just laid them out by chance. So I'll read them and contemplate them. So this is a magical altar this week. I have a compass that is on loan. A young friend of mine lent me his compass, and so it's on the table. And I have a tetrahedron. So there are 5 Platonic solids, and the 5 Platonic solids are in fact the 5 elements. And this goes all the way back. If you read Timaeus, you'll know that that these Platonic solids are they date, they go way back to antiquity. This is the tetrahedron. So you can see that what's happened is that triangle has simply received another point and now been extruded into another dimension. It's been extruded into a dimension in which it has volume. So perhaps the way to look at Chesed is the dimension of volume. So that would really be the third dimension as we think of it, is a voluminous space with an X, Y, Z axis. And Chesed means mercy, and it's associated with absolute permissiveness and generosity. 4 in the West, unlike in Asia, is considered a very lucky, very stable number. And as we know, the name of God is called Tetragrammaton. There are 4 elements. The name of God is, in Hebrew, is spelled like this. And sometimes it's drawn in this shape. So this is an anthropomorphization of the Tetragrammaton. And you can see it's Yod, He, Vav, He. And the 2 He's is, I said last week that, how many letters are there in Tetragrammaton? Woo, there's 3, because the He occurs twice. So there is a mystery there, but you can see the, essentially, this kind of anthropomorphic structure. This reminds us of Adam. Adam is the archetypal human being. Adam Kadmon is an androgyne, archetypal human, if you say, the ideal of archetypal human unity. And there's a story about the abyss and why it exists and why it represents our alienation from our collective unity. And I think we're going to talk about that a little bit more later. But the point here is that the Tetragrammaton is a anthropomorphic, or a link to an anthropomorphic role to play in the divine becoming. So often we think of monotheistic gods as male gods. This wasn't actually always the case. In antiquity, there's evidence that there were matriarchal or even, androgyarchal, can you have that, right? Androgyarchal. Ideas. There were ideas that transcended gender. I know that nowadays there's a real backlash. There's 2 things going on. There's the challenging of gender, and then there's also a kind of a falling back into gender roles. People are using the Kabbalion, which is a very modern book, which kind of pretends to be ancient knowledge, but they're using that to find laws of gender and so on, which I don't necessarily see myself, because the gender polarities are created when the world is created, and the world is, in a way, the form by which we perceive it. So there's a concept called the Demiurge. The Demiurge is a Gnostic concept of a god that emerges out of the limitless Sophia. Soph, Ein Sof means openness. Sophia means wisdom. The limitless, transcendent wisdom, the sea of wisdom, the pleroma it's called. And the Demiurge emerges out of this and architectures a world. And this world that the Demiurge architectures has a 4-fold structure. And of course you see in myths, Zeus is a 4-letter word. Odin is a 4-letter word. father gods, demiurgic gods, are connected somehow to the number 4. And this is not just because the compass is such an extraordinary human discovery, but also due to something that Pythagoras was very keen on called the Tetractys of the Decap. And this is what mathematicians will call a triangular number. 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 equals 10. Which is a way of saying that 4 is the bridge between 1 and 10. If 1 is simple unity and 10 is, shall we say, a fully developed unity, the seed and the tree, then 4 is the number of stages that it takes for the seed to become the tree. 4 is the master number in terms of the subtle architecture that allows unity to go from simple to complex and to be both at once. And so this is why Tetragrammaton has a divine quality. And I don't actually encourage the idea that we resent or disrespect this deity. I think there's a lot of that going around, and I can see why. But I actually think in its essence and understood correctly, this is a profound gift to humanity. And I think that we can explore it on that level. And by bringing graceful energy to it, graceful energy will issue forth. 4 has very much to do with graceful, generous energy. It absolutely also has a kind of a stasis to it. 4 is very much about order. 4 is very much about benevolent control. And we all know that the line is fine between benevolent and overweening control. Where does it stop? And that's where the future developments of this energy are going to go, into the checks and balances. Because Kesset can hit an extreme. But in its efficient phase, its rising phase, it has a profoundly healing quality and a profoundly peaceful quality. It has an efficient phase, and then a peak, and then a deficient phase when the next energy will start to rise, and then we can ride those kind of interlocking waves, so that we don't get caught in a deficient locked energy. So clearly time is now moving. And so let's have a look at these elements on the altar, because I want you to make your own altar, and you can incorporate some of these if you like. The runes, I wouldn't necessarily recommend you do that. I cast them because there's 24 of them, and it divides into 4 times 6, and it had some beauty to me, and I will contemplate them over the course of the week. But you'll see the centerpiece here is the Tetractus. These 10 stones form into the Tetractus triangle. I collected these stones. They're quite. They're from my homeland, which is Newfoundland, and I collected them from the beach. All the beaches have these beautiful round stones on them, and I collected them on a day that was meaningful to me. And so I like to arrange them in different forms. And this is the Tetractus arrangement. You can put it into the tree. You can put it into the Tetractus. It gives you a good sense of the numbers as things. Objects, stones. Stones make excellent counting devices. Very tactile. So this is the Tetractus of the Decap. So this is a model of the Tree of Life, or it's a model of the numbers that is comparable to the Tree of Life, but it's more of a Greek persuasion than a Hebrew persuasion. But we can use both. And as you'll see later on, the Tetractus and the Tree of Life really do co-implicate one another. Imagine that Tetractus on the faces of this tetrahedron. Did you know that if you connect all the faces of the tetrahedron, you make a line from the center of each, you can construct another tetrahedron inside of it. And then you could do that ad infinitum, because a tetrahedron is self-dual. Tetrahedrons typically represent the element of fire in the Pythagorean system, but it's the only one of the Platonic solids that is self-dual. In other words, it produces an image of itself within itself, infinite, fractally. So it has a purity. In the Timaeus, of course, everything comes down to triangles and tetrahedra. Another element that I'd like you to explore, obviously I have the four magical tools, the cups, the sword, pentacles, and wands, and just some elements that I like, that I find aesthetically appealing. This is a magic square. This is another thing that you can put on the altar, and I encourage you to explore this. This is very much about what we're doing. This is, let's get this so the focus is up. Taro, ator, rota, orat. Roughly, taro is, of course, taro. Ator is a suffix that we will put onto a word like operator to suggest instrumentality. And rota is a wheel, and orat is voice or prayer. So I understand this and use it quite extensively, as you'll see, to mean taro, ator, rota, orat. The taro operates to spin the wheel of prayer, and the wheel of voice, if you like. And so this is a mantra that you can chant. So, for example, if I've got 4 directions, I can chant Taro, ator, rota, orat, creating a resonance in all 4 directions. I can feel that. I can feel the circle around me now vibrating with energy. So if I just say taro, ator, rota, orat, that's not empowered speech. What I just showed you is, I guess, what you could call the voice of fire. So the empowered speech, vibrated speech. This is a big part of magic, is knowing the difference between when you're saying something and when you are voicing it. So that was an example of voicing and creating the 4-directional spaces. Okay, down here is abracadabra, triangle. This is a talismanic practice. It does connect to the Tetractys, but this is outside the scope of this particular video. How much time do we got left? All right. So let's talk about the 4 fours. I think I talked about everything here. You can, I recommend the Taro, Ator, Rota, Orat square, the four fours, and the Tetractys as elements of an altar that you can otherwise explore to however you will. I have placed these in very specific places. So fire, air, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to switch this up. Fun. And now they're in the right place. Fire, water, air, earth, like this. This is actually connected to Enochian watchtowers. If you've heard of those, this is where the Enochian watchtowers would be sitting. So this is the watchtower of fire, watchtower of water, watchtower of air, watchtower of earth. So, using the Thoth cards here, the 4 of Wands, completion. 4s are always very stable, very nice, but they do tend to have the danger of becoming static. So the Four of Cups is known as luxury and has a blasé quality to it because you can rest at 4 and not engage in transformation and therefore engage stagnancy. So there is the possibility of getting stagnant in the lap of luxury. Truce, of course, represents no true resolution, but a pause in a battle. And power is an obvious image of 4 towers assembled into a square, which we see repeated in this altar itself. So this you could see as a map, right? This map, and I didn't consciously do it, but effectively that's what's going on this altar. I've got 4 aces here too, because the aces are present. This isn't because it's this week, but you know, we're dealing with 4. There is a reminder that that all of the cards are basically just multiplications of the aces. Right, and looking at them in the Rider-Waite-Smith version, we have this image of could be a wedding, a celebration. It's a completion. There's definitely an establishment. The establishment of a kingdom, the establishment of a plane, a table. A kingdom is basically a table. A plane upon which structures are organized. Service is provided. The Four of Cups, again, this sort of ennui, this luxury past the point of appreciation. This is a warning. So we can see this as a call to appreciate what we have. The kind of resting knight. You've got one sword under the bed, but really he's kind of just meditating, and he's got most of his swords are up. He knows he's not in active combat. He's prepared, but there's a distance from the battle here. There's a rest. This is sometimes called the convalescent. That's what Benabel Wen calls it, and I like that, convalescence. And of course, this famous miser card. So this is the RWS version of the Four of Pentacles. It really does suggest the hoarding of wealth, and mercantility and so forth. It's interesting that Crowley's feels a much more positive than Rider-Waite's. This, in a way, enters into a juxtaposition with the 5s and the 6. So there's an image in the 6 of generosity, an image in the 5 of poverty. So wealth and poverty, and then redistribution of wealth in 6. So there is a kind of a threefold logic in happening in the 4, 5s, and 6s of the RWS. I suggest you check that out. And then the Solobusca, because it's awesome. I'm not even going to pretend to know what all this stuff means. The Solobusca is something I'm still exploring. Isn't it wonderful that, you know, as we get further along the path, we become closer and closer to being beginners? Beginningness. So yeah, I'm just beginning to understand this mysterious deck. The Four of Wands, very grotesque, very wonderful. The Four of Cups. I believe it was one of my students suggested that perhaps the Solobusca is actually a homoerotic Edwardian forgery. It certainly has definitely deep levels of eros of all different sorts kind of in it. But they're wonderful pictures. The illustrations are just incredible. And you can kind of get this idea of, like, you know, packing away miserliness, right? Packing away these discs. Actually, this is the cup. This is the cup, and this is the disc. It's a little bit difficult to tell. This is, yeah. This is the disc, this is the cup. So, this is, oh, time has run out, and I still want to show the Tarot of the Holy Light, because it's just a lovely deck. I would really recommend, I don't have time to show it here, I really recommend Ithel Cahone's Tarot as Color. It's a superb deck to look at. You can look at the Viscontis and the Marseille decks as well, but they tend to be kind of a little boring because they're just pip cards. But certainly this is an amazing deck. The Tarot of the Holy Light, again, quite mysterious. Yeah, I encourage you to become suffused with as much tarot as you can, particularly fours, and build yourself an altar to ground, to clear, and to prepare your energy to begin a new cycle of beginning, middle, and end here in the fourth week of the Force of Life calendar. And I'm Dr. Peter Deschemin, the tarot philosopher, and thank you for joining me.
Here is an altar that I took the time to make. This is a magic square that is especially helpful working with tarot. I have the fours as well as supportive aces. I have put the runes out because there's 24 of them in 8 groups of 3, or rather 3 groups of 4 groups of 6. That was just a intuitive decision. I have taken this week to start to do a bit of organizational work, which is excellent for Chesed. I've just taken some of my tools and organized them out here on the table. And I recommend that you find a way of making an altar that works for you. It doesn't have to be according to a formula, but take the symbols that mean something to you now and lay them out. I would suggest the fours because that's what we're working on. An altar is a table, and a table almost always has 4 sides. And this gives us an idea of how the understanding gives rise to the extended plane of mercy, if you will. So how Bina gives forth to Chesed. Now, this is the rune at the 25th blank rune, but I want to show you this. So this structure, the important thing is the stones. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and 10 stones. And I've got some other stuff in there. But the 10 stones are arranged in 1, 2, 3, 4 layers. This is called the Tetractys of the Decad. Taken further, of course, you can connect this to the compass and also to the abracadabra or abrahadabra formulas. But what I want you to focus on today, this week, is the relationship of 4 to 10. The fact that 4 is the bridge between 1 and 10. as given in this triangular number, the Pythagorean Tetractys of the Decad. And if you can get some stones and make a Tetractys, that would be an excellent thing to put on your table. So if you're making a table, and I recommend that you do, have at least something to refer to the Tetractys this week, and some and the fours. And otherwise, it's just kind of a form of art. There we go. Yeah, it's just a kind of a meditative way of preparing yourself energetically for the time that you're in.